Hello and welcome to the Last Word on Spurs. We hope you're keeping very, very safe and well. Happy New Year. If you wasn't with us yesterday for what seems a continuation of what is happening to our football club at the moment, thank you so much for joining us. If you're listening to the show for the first time, you can find us on iTunes. We're on Spotify. We're across all major audio platforms. We're, of course, on Twitter at Last Word on Spurs. We're on Facebook and Instagram too. And joining me, my co-host, back with me for quite a number of shows coming up. I'll let him be the judge if that's a good or a bad thing for him in his life. We've got the wonderful Matty Hayes, runs a superb YouTube channel. Matt, love to see you back on Last Word on Spurs. How are you other than Tottenham in your life at the moment?
All the good Spurs, things are absolutely fantastic. Enjoyed the World Cup, some other good football going on in other places. We'll pretend that Spurs haven't played since mid-November, but Ricky, always a pleasure to be back on. It's been too long, but like you said, my face will be here quite a bit throughout the transfer window. So I'm looking forward to that, and of course looking forward to another brilliant show with Lyall.
Oh, listen, mate, thank you ever so much. This man, we have him on Last Word on Spurs. He always pops up during the transfer window season. I'm not convinced whether he actually ever enjoys coming on because there is always drama that seems to be happening behind the scenes at our great club. And this poor gentleman seems to get a lot of the flack of it in terms of why Spurs are not doing deals like it is. Again, and it's like him that's holding the purse strings, which I can't quite believe. We've got the wonderful Lyall Thomas from Sky Sports. Lyall, thank you so much for giving us your time. How are you, mate, firstly?
My pleasure. I'm good. Happy New Year. Good to see you guys. Here we are, another transfer window. Here we are again.
Unhappy Spurs fans, all of us jumping up and down, expecting lots to happen, Lyall. Same as usual, right?
I can imagine. Well, yeah, but listen, hopefully I can cut through some of the doom and gloom and bring some sort of objectivity and measure to it. I think it's not all doom and gloom from where I'm sitting, but I can understand why Spurs fans are unhappy, of course. But it's not like I said, not all doom and gloom. Not in my opinion. I mean, I think there's still plenty of positives to look at. But hopefully, I might be going out on a limb on my own here, but gauging some of how things are on social media at the moment. I mean, it seems a bit toxic on Tottenham social media at the moment.
Yeah, no,
it seems like one of the gates of hell you don't want to go anywhere near. But
yeah,
I think there's listen. Obviously, we'll get into it in more detail, but I think Tottenham have still come a long way in the last year. If you sit back and take stock to where we were when we were last January, when we were sitting here, obviously Conte had been in for a little while and things were looking up, weren't they? But Tottenham was still sort of looking, outside the top four and were not looking like a top four team. And then they've been made into a top four team and they're still there or thereabouts. There's still a very, very long way to go. I mean, I know it feels like we're further into the season because we're now in January, but if you actually think about the number of games played, we're not actually that far into the season yet. So, you have to sort of think about that for a second, that actually we're more sort of in November in terms of matches than we are in terms of January. Everyone's thinking,
this sounds awful sadness for you telling me there's more games to come. I don't know it's meant to cheer me up or make me feel worse.
Well, there's more games to come for this bad patch of form to be turned around. So, let's get into it and I'll drink my...
Absolutely. Mate, listen... Like I say, thank you so much. And Lyall, listen, we're very lucky on Last One Spurs. We're getting new listeners, new viewers all the time. Just want to give you a bit of a background, Lyall, on your role at Sky and essentially what you cover there.
Well, my role has actually changed since the last time that we spoke. So you can take the assistant out of my name. So I'm now a news editor rather than assistant news editor. So that's a good thing.
We've got a promotion. We've got a promotion. Come on.
Yeah. So thank you very much. So that's a good thing. It means more of a responsible role on the news desk day to day, and I'm still coordinating our transfer news gathering. So as the sort of the nucleus in the middle and making sure that we're chasing the right stories and chasing the right information and bringing that information in, making sure we're on top of things and basically a news editor, but just specialising in transfers for the transfer window. So I'm doing that as well. That's my job at the moment. And today was effectively day one. No bank holiday Monday for me.
And like I say, mate, again, we massively appreciate it. We are recording on Bank Holiday Monday. It is the evening after the night before. I went to bed at 3 a.m. last night and I was sitting there thinking, you just don't know what's around the corner with this football club. And maybe, Lyall, like I say, having you on here, someone that offers an outside perspective, can maybe give us just a bit of optimism that there is some good things around the corner. I just think being closely connected to Spurs, probably me and Matt are, with regards to watching every game and having to analyse a lot of the games, I think you sometimes lose yourself within. as to what is quite happening right now. So let's get into it. As you've said, look, January transfer window is now open, and I think obviously Spurs, you'd hope, will be looking to gain some momentum with some new additions to come, hopefully in this window, to really bolster their options. I think probably the biggest question at the moment is surrounding where we are going as a club. Direction, really, I think, is always a case where at Tottenham, and that is my little one in the background, just announcing himself that he'll be going to bed hopefully in the next 15 minutes with some luck. Obviously, I think, like I say, the direction is a real concern at the moment. It just feels that there's a lack of structure on the pitch, maybe as well as off it at the moment. And I think that summed up really the mood of just the nature of that performance against Aston Villa yesterday from what we saw, the 2-0 defeat. Can you just give us an idea, if you can, Lyall, before we get into transfers and what could happen in this window, of what the mood is like behind the scenes at Tottenham? I think that's probably one of the aspects which I think many would be interested to know.
Yeah, well, it's difficult to ascertain inside 24 hours of the game because obviously I think people at Tottenham have not been very in Tottenham, around Tottenham, not very keen to chat today. It's not been a very good 24 hours for them after that game. I think the first thing to say is obviously I understand why Tottenham fans are annoyed at the moment. I mean, there's multiple facets to that. First and foremost, the performances, right? I think Tottenham traditionally, and Tottenham fans traditionally, are okay with a bad result here and there if the team is playing good football and attractive football and exciting football to watch. And these displays recently have been a bit flat. Obviously, they've been very slow to start for a long time, going behind in games 2-0. I think in quite a lot of the games recently, and having to claw their way back. And just yesterday was sort of the one that they didn't claw their way back in, really. So it all been sort of coming to a head, I think, hadn't it, over a period of time. Tottenham had sort of been grinding out some results here and there, not playing very well, not playing any sort of glamorous football, really, and it just not looking like it was clicking very much. So I can see why supporters would be very frustrated with that. Also, obviously, I have to say, there's an added frustration that the team down the road that are vehemently hated are also sitting pretty on the top of the league and playing exciting football at the same time. So that's obviously another source of very, very deep frustration, which I understand as well. So, on that side of things, it isn't very good at the moment. But then on the other hand, like I said, if you sit back and take stock about where Tottenham have come in the last 12 months, Antonio Conte yesterday called it a miracle. You could almost call it a miracle, really, given the squad that he inherited and, how far they've come in a short space of time. I mean, he would say that because it's, to the most extent his doing, right? And he obviously wants more to happen. He wants more the club to commit more, especially in the transfer window, and improve the squad. So, but this was always a process. I mean, they've spoken about this being a process for since the beginning, right? He always said it wasn't going to take one transfer window; it would take 2 or 3 transfer windows for them to, refresh the squad that they've got and bring in more quality. And I think that is the case. I think that in the last 2 windows, they've obviously brought in players. Those players have improved the team. I mean, have they improved the excitement of the performances? No, but they have improved results because Spurs, a year ago, were not where they are now, right? I mean, Tottenham in the table, okay, they dropped out of the top 4 recently, but they're still just a point behind, still within touching distance of second place. I don't know how many points it is. I think it's only 4 or 6 points from Man City.
Yeah.
So they're not that far away, and if and when it clicks and results pick up again, then they can have another push into the top 4 as last year. So I think Tottenham are in a good position in the league. They are in a good position in terms of achieving top 4 again. But obviously people are frustrated that the performances are not that pleasurable to watch. And nobody likes losing at home to Aston Villa, right? So
absolutely. The nature of it, Lyall.
That's the nature of it, yeah.
You hit it on the head there.
The lack understandable.
I think
completely understandable.
I think the problem that I say yesterday is that, look, there's a number of aspects around Tottenham that I know many people are unhappy with when it comes to maybe the aspect of the lack of investment to some degree from the board, to maybe the manager showing an inflexibility to the current system where he's adamant that's the way he wants to play. And I think if you're going to play that way, then you also have to have the players to do that. And I know we're going to come on to this, but I just feel at the moment Spurs do not have the players in general to fit a Conte system. So you're asking for a compromise from either the board to give Conte the money to improve the squad, or you're asking for a compromise from Antonio Conte to change and flex his system, which, as we stand right now, he doesn't seem like he wants to do. And I think that's what leads to what we're seeing right now is a really toxic mood online. And at times in that stadium yesterday, a very toxic mood, which then filters through to the players, which is difficult because I think going to that stadium and you're paying the best part of £80-90 to go and watch the team, I think it does also reflect that the players have to give the fans something to cheer about. And
of course. Absolutely.
I think when you're watching the style at the moment, it's very hard to get behind that as a fan. And I totally understand that players need to play in a conducive atmosphere. I understand that, but also it is down to the players to create an atmosphere to give the fans something to cheer about. And I think that's the concern at the moment. So I think that those are the overall concerns which you've shared there. Like Spurs aren't a million miles away from the top four, but at the same time, it feels that as a club at the moment, we are lacking a real sense of direction and purpose. And I think the biggest thing, which I know we'll come on to, is that it feels that we're in a situation right now where Conte doesn't want to commit to Tottenham because we're in the middle or just starting a January transfer window where maybe if he feels he'll commit, he may not get what he wants to some degree. And Tottenham feel they may not want to commit to Conte because they're concerned about what the future looks like. So there's got to be an emphasis of shift here, hasn't there? Someone's got to commit to someone to take this forward.
Yeah, I think performances wise, it's been coming to a head, right? Because you can't keep going 2-0 down in every game and get away with it. You just can't. I mean, they've been getting away with it for ages, really. So in terms of performances and toxic sort of mood in the stadium, that I think Conte said yesterday, didn't he, that he saw this situation coming or something. He knew, So here we are, right? But in terms of investment in the squad, I mean, if you sort of sit back and look at Tottenham in terms of the other teams, the situation that they have is there are certain teams around them. Obviously, Newcastle has joined that, who have the money to almost an unlimited amount of funds to keep investing in the squad. And really, what you have now is a situation where if you want to compete for a place in the top four and compete for a silverware, you're looking like you have to invest north of £100 million every season, every summer, in some new players. Because the best players are costing at least 50, 60, 70 million pounds or more, right? So there are only a limited number of clubs that can do that. I mean, even Liverpool can't do that. And they've been up there, competing for titles for the last however long. And they're in a similar situation that they're not in the position to be spending hundreds of millions of pounds every year. I mean, they've put a chunk of the club up for sale. They're looking for investment because they know that. Because they've realised that they can't find those funds from nowhere to commit that amount of money to reinvesting in the squad every year just to have a shot at the title. I mean, obviously you can't buy a title, right? But you have to invest to give yourself the chance of having a shot at the title. So if you think about it from their point of view, and Tottenham are in a similar situation. I mean, that money's got to come from somewhere. Hundreds of millions of pounds to invest every summer. I mean, they invested just over 100 million in the summer. That's. I mean, they would argue that is a good sum of money to invest in the squad, and also that I think Conte has been conveying the message that it would take a number of transfer windows for them to do that. So they can't just commit 200 million in one window. It's going to have to be 100 million in one window, and then a little bit more the next window, a little bit more the next window, and then obviously any one they might sell can also be reinvested. But Tottenham have, if you think about club models and the way club models are, I mean, Tottenham are not currently a model where they're able to sell their best assets for big money, right? I mean, they could do that a few years ago when they were sort of up and coming. They were buying players for less money, making them into marquee signings and selling them on, and then looking to reinvest that money. Now they've lifted themselves up to a more of an elite club. That money's got to come from somewhere else rather than selling players. Unless you're going to sell Harry Kane for £100 million, which they obviously weren't willing to do. So, obviously the things like the naming rights are coming up. When that gets settled, then obviously that will be a huge influx of investment into the club, money that will be able to be used to reinvest in the squad as well. But that's not been finalised yet. I'm not aware of when that might happen. And I'm sure there will be other revenue streams that we'll be looking at in the future. But I think Spurs would argue that they invested plenty of money. Whether that money was invested in the right places is another question. You can invest a lot of money, but you still got to buy the right players. You can invest a lot of money in the wrong players. A lot of clubs have done that. So that's the key to it for me, is not necessarily how much Spurs are investing, but what they're investing in, and are they investing in the right players? Are they choosing the right players? I think they're starting to do that with Paratici, but I think before that they didn't. So what they're having to do is fix a lot of the effectively questionable decisions or poor decisions over buying certain players that haven't worked out since the end of the Pochettino era. They're now having to fix that, really. They brought players in that haven't been good enough or have had the wrong attitude or both. And they're now having to recycle the squad and bring fresh faces in. And that's what's taking time. And it's taking more than just one transfer window, right? And I guess, I mean, that's just the nature of it. That's just the way it is at the moment. And it's painful. It's painful to watch, right, while they're going through this process. But at the same time, and I hate to make this this comparison, but Arsenal went through that as well. Arsenal went through a long and painful journey to get where they are now. Even since they went through, Unai Emery and then the early days of Mikel Arteta, when they were languishing around, sort of mid-table, and everybody was very frustrated, and people were calling for Arteta to be sacked, and people were complaining about the players that they signed. And over a period of a number of transfer windows, they've now got to a point where they've got a team that is totally buys into the way they want to play and is loving every minute of it. And that's put them where they are. So that's really what Tottenham have got to find. I mean, not necessarily copying the Arsenal way of playing or copying the Arsenal model, but investing in the right players, in the right positions, who buy into that way of playing, the Conte way of playing, and can reap the benefits of that. And then performances will improve from there. And obviously, we're still in that process. So that's my assessment of it at the moment, to try and be as fair and balanced about it as possible.
I think a lot of what you said there, and a lot of what some of the comments are coming through with as well, is just managing expectations, because it's so easy to get carried away when, with the way we were playing towards the end of last season, with getting into the Champions League, with some of the results we had. It's especially with a manager like Antonio Conte, it's so easy to think, well, this is it, that's it, we're where we want to be. But my favorite phrase in football is that things are never as good as they seem, but they're also never as bad as they seem. Now, the nature of supporting Spurs is that's proven true every 9 months, but it's we just need to realize that it is a process, and there is a path that we need to go on in order to get to that place that we want to be. And you touched on there a few of the comments that Antonio Conte, a few of the points that he made after that game against Aston Villa. He hit out at the crazy expectations that have been placed in his Tottenham side, and he said that ultimately we're a club that might need 14, 15 quality players, that needs to be spending 50 to 70 million, or buying 50 to 70 million pound players every season if we want to become those serious contenders. And we've just suffered our 4th loss in 7 games in the league. We've conceded more than 1 goal in a 7th consecutive game for the first time since 1988, and we've gone 1-0 down in each of our last 10 games. So things are not good. Conte is clearly growing very, very frustrated with that, like we are. Do you think what he has said and the kind of harsh words that he's put towards the club in the media, do you think that will affect the way the club are going to approach the transfer market? And further on to that, would it affect it in a positive or negative way? Because you can see how the club, like Ricky said, might not be willing to commit to a manager who clearly has a lot of doubts, but you also might see that they could think, okay, well, we need to put this money in order for something to actually happen.
I think, well, I mean, the first thing to say is I think that his public comments are, well, almost certainly the same as his private comments to the club. So I don't think his public comments will necessarily change things, because it doesn't sound like he's saying anything that he hasn't already said to the club internally, right? I mean, it sounds like he's pretty open and honest about his assessment of what they need to do, and it's up to them to follow that or not. I think his assessment of where the club is pretty fair. I wouldn't necessarily agree, but then again, he's in a much more qualified position than I am, really, to say that they need 50, 60, 70 million pound players to do that. I mean, there are obviously gems out there to be unearthed, as many clubs have for less than that. But I know what he means. I mean, his general point is that this is the ballpark figure of what quality players are worth these days, even quality young players. I mean, especially if you're going to buy them, domestically. These sort of the best up and coming players at the other clubs, the clubs that are outside the top 6 or the top 8. That's how much money that they're going to cost. That's just that's just where the market's at. So I think it's a system.
He refers to this word. I'm sorry to cut in there. He refers to obviously this word, the policy. The policies that Spurs are looking to buy players that are young and upcoming, maybe not necessarily ready right now. Mm-hmm. But Conte is a manager that clearly wants to work with players that are ready now. And this again is, and just for a lot of the viewers and listeners here, we know we've got about 700, 800 of you watching us live here. We are going to ask Lyall about Pedro Porro. Don't worry, we are going to ask Lyall about key players. But we just want to discuss where we are with Antonio Conte first, because he is the manager of the football club. And before we start talking about players, it would be good to know where we stand with the manager before we start talking about A, B, and C of players. And this is why I'm really keen to understand, Lyall, whether you know or have heard anything behind the scenes, whether somebody has gone back on their word or if the goalposts have been changed. Because what I can't quite understand is that when you go to talk to Antonio Conte, in terms of him being your manager, you know very well, the same as when you approach Jose Mourinho, that you have to give them exactly what they want in order for them to be successful. That's just the case. He doesn't want an alternative. He doesn't want player B, C. He wants player A. He wants that precise player. And if you don't give them exactly what they want, then it isn't ever going to work. So what I'm just trying to understand is that we're now, he got appointed in November of 2021, November 2021, am I right? I'm losing my years now. November 2021. So just over a year now. We're 13, 14 months in. I don't know why we shouldn't be having this conversation when we should all know where the goalposts were at the time of him coming in. We know what he wants. We know what he expects. So I'm baffled as to... Well, I'm not baffled because it's Tottenham Hotspur Football Club. I'm not baffled at all. But I'm just trying to understand why we're in this situation, because we know what his intentions are. We know what he needs. It's either back him to what he needs to get us to where we want to be, or don't bother. And it should have been a case where we should never have approached him in the first place if we're not willing to go with his ideology. Do you see where I'm coming from, Lyall? This is what I'm just trying to understand. Has the goalpost been moved at all in the last 14 months, where there's been a change from what he was told at the beginning to coming in to what is the vision now? Because he's making it clear from his perspective that Spurs can only sign players, in his opinion, that are young, upcoming, and it's part of a policy of the club. Is that not what he was expecting? Do we know that?
Well, I think it's a balance. I don't think that necessarily the goalposts have changed. I think he's always understood that. If you listen to his comments and listen to what he says, it's quite clear that he understands the club that he's at. He said many times that Tottenham are a club that will be looking to invest in some younger players and bringing them on, and is not in a position to be paying for the £100 million players in the same way that your Man Cities are or your Chelseas are or what have you. I think he knows and said that it's a process and will take a few transfer windows and to get there, right? So I think he understands. I don't think the goalposts have changed either, but I also think it's a balancing act, and I think he gets that as well. I think he realizes that as much as he will want to bring in ready-made players, these 14, 15 players who can do it right now, he will also want to bring it. He'll also be where the club wants to bring in players, younger players, to develop them for the future. And I think if you're Paratici and your job is to make sure the squad is as good as it can be now and in the future, you need to be doing both things, right? Even the top clubs do that. Look at Chelsea at the moment; they're investing in some of the biggest young talent there is. They're committing so much money to that, and these players are under no illusions that they're going to come and play straight away. So it's a balancing act between what the club wants and what Paratici's role as a sporting director, and what Conte wants now, obviously. And I think it certainly suits Conte, I think, for there to be some uncertainty over his situation and uncertainty over his future, because there's always that element of having to him pushing for what he wants, and Spurs, if they want to keep him, having to give him what he wants. So it puts him in a good position really to have that element of uncertainty over his future at the moment, I think, to push for more of what he wants. And managers are always going to do that. Of course they are. They're always going to push for more of what they want, exactly the players that they want, exactly the amount of money. And it's a balancing act between what they want and what the club can provide, right? But I don't think he's under any illusions or has been I certainly don't think he's been, given any false promises that are suddenly being, reneged on. That's not the situation as I understand it. No, and I think Spurs will look to improve the team when and as much as they can, in terms of depending on the amount of money that they've got. I mean, they've obviously been looking at Pedro Porro recently. There's some interest there. I mean, it's cool for now because, as I've just reported on Sky, that Sporting are quite insistent that they pay this release clause. And I'm sure some fans might say, "We'll just pay the release clause." But
yeah, that's what the reaction will be from Spurs fans when you do hear the reports, Lyall, that no offence, that stadium is generating a huge amount of money. It's got concerts, it's got boxing there. And I think, again, it's quite telling that, we haven't yet seen the financial results drop for the year. And we're now the 2nd of January 2023. Look, again, nobody knows those results until they're released. So we can't make up those figures. The figures are going to be the figures. But I think that is the biggest concern, that if that's a player that Conte wants and the asking price, go and pay the asking price for the player. If that's who he wants. I mean, this is, again, it's a difficult one because, again, Spurs might feel that release clause is overpriced. Do you see what I'm coming from? But if that's a player the manager wants and he needs to work with him early, and bearing in mind Spurs have got City twice, I think, this month, Arsenal, massive important FA Cup game, a North London derby, as I say, this is a massive month for the club. And I don't think they can afford to do what they did last January and wait to the last 2 days. And we got very lucky last January, if I'm being honest with you, because of how good Bentancur and Kulusevski fit with the club. We might not get that luck again.
It's also a market, right? So if you overpay for players, you also raise the value of other players you might want to sign. So you have to remember that at the same time, it's a market, right? So if you feel that the selling club has been unrealistic in their expectations and the valuation of the player, then for the sake of the market and for the sake of the other players you might want to sign both now and in the future, you don't overpay for players. There are many independent minds that clubs will seek to give them an appraisal and evaluation of a player and to come up with a figure that works, right? And I can see why Sporting Lisbon are holding on to him for dear life, because he's been one of their best players this season. He's young talent, up and coming, and they obviously feel that he's worth that. And if he's got a release clause, they're going to fight tooth and nail to have that paid, especially where the Premier League's concerned as well. If you think about the way that the attitudes towards the Premier League from clubs on the continent is very much, well, you've got more money than anyone else, any other countries at the moment. So this is what we think he's worth. So you better pay it. And that's their right to do that, right? But if Spurs feel that the value, even if it was a release clause, is unrealistic, then should they go and pay that for a player that's then going to have a knock-on effect on the rest of the market and also cause them to overpay for players? I'm not going to do that. So I think the way I engage at the moment, the situation is that the valuation is a bit unrealistic, and considering how many games he's played and where he is in the market, what position he is. And so, that interest is cooled for now. That doesn't necessarily mean they won't pick that interest back up towards the end of the window. He's obviously a player they like very much. They've also got a situation where they've got 3 right backs currently as well. So, if they're going to bring another one in, at least one of those has to move on. It's a lot more complicated. It's easy for people to sit back and say, well, it's only this amount of millions of pounds. It's only that amount of millions of pounds. But it's not just whether you have the money or not. It's also, like I said, it's a market, and everything you pay and every valuation of a player has a knock-on effect for the rest of the market that can affect you detrimentally. So that will be part of it as well. Not just a case of Spurs being stubborn and not wanting to pay. It's not as simple as that.
I think on the price of players as well, just personally, I feel a bit of a mistake that Spurs made was so publicly announcing, we have 150 million that we're putting into the club here for transfers, and it's a stick that Tottenham fans are using to.
But I don't think they said that they were always going to pay all of that, spend all of that, did they? I never remember them saying that. I think that was sort of taken as a given by supporters and by perhaps some writers and members of the media who maybe misinterpreted or got slightly cross wires, that they said they were investing 150 million back into the football club. I don't think that it was ever candidly said that every single penny of that would be spent on transfers. But I think actually if you tot it up, and if you tot up the money that they also committed to actually buying Romero, Christian Romero, even though that deal was agreed before, if you add that to it, that does take the total that they spent in the summer up towards the 150 million mark. So yeah, I think that with the best of intentions, I think that it was a show that we are willing to commit money, and they did commit that money. But like I said, that brings us back round to the real question for me is not how much you invest, but what do you invest it on? Mm-hmm. So if you want, I think that's a more interesting thing to get into. Really, is have they made the right decisions on buying certain players? Certain players, I think yes. Other players, I think not. I don't think they made the right decision because obviously Jed Spence, for example, really good, talented youngster, talented right back. Was he worth £25 million? Not so sure. Coming out of the Championship, but clearly a talent. But if you're going to commit £25 million to something in that window, I think Spurs should have committed £25 million to something that would be playing, someone who would be playing every week. So perhaps that £25 million could have been better spent elsewhere on somebody that was going to be playing every week. So I mean that's a particular, it's really the only one particular decision actually in the summer market I can think of that I would put a huge question mark over whether that was the right one, especially when they already had two right backs in the club.
Do you expect him to go on loan out of interest? Just Spence before Matt comes back in there. Do you expect Spence to leave this window and go on loan because the lack of game time can't be doing him right? You're told that he's not going to be going on loan as things stand.
That's what I've been told by my sources so far. Is that as things stand at the moment, he's not going anywhere.
Right. Okay.
But, whether that changes towards the end of the window, let's see. Again, right. I think that will depend on what happens in that position, because Spurs are obviously been looking at this Pedro Porro quite seriously for a time, and obviously that's cool for the moment. Doesn't mean it's off the table completely, but at the moment it's not happening. It's not advancing. So if something does happen there, then maybe the potential for Spencer going on loan comes back around on the table. But at the moment, I'm told no.
That probably leads us into the positions, Matty. Probably very nice if you're on this segue.
Yeah, look, the right wing back dilemma is reportedly only 50% of the battle that Tottenham could be fighting in the January transfer window. There's reports that Tottenham's two priorities for the window is one right wing back and a new attacking player. We've seen other reports as well that Tottenham could approach this window in a similar way to the January window last year when we signed one player on a permanent deal and one on a loan with an option/obligation to buy with Dejan Kulusevski. In terms of those positions, first of all, Lyall, with a right wing back and an attacking player, are those the same positions that you're hearing Tottenham will be looking to bring in this window?
Well, an attacking player is certainly something that they want as well, because they were trying for other players, weren't they, in the summer and didn't get them. The obvious one that I reported on at the time was Anthony Gordon, the one they were trying to do at the same time as they were doing Richarlison. Now, Anthony Gordon is still a player that Spurs really, really like a lot. I mean, I hear Paratici really, really loves him. He's one of his favourite players in the Premier League that they don't have. And I mean, the problem is that his valuation has not necessarily dropped. Really, his form's not been as good, I don't think, this year as it was at the back end of last year. So I think it's difficult to see whether Anthony Gordon would come in this window. I think we need to see how the rest of the season plays out. I think for him, just because his valuation I think would be too high and he'd just be too valuable to Everton. I mean, they obviously really, really want to keep him, but he's one they were looking at. They wanted Spurs. Malinowski, the one at Atalanta, was another one they had a look at doing. That didn't happen in the summer. Whether that one comes back around as well will be interesting to see. He had a year left in the summer. Now he's only got 6 months, so I think he can talk to other clubs this month. I think I'm right in saying he's only got 6 months left. Let's see if that one comes back around at the moment. I'm not aware of that they're active on any attackers at the moment, but it is a position that they want to strengthen. And there is a gap there because obviously Bryan Hill played yesterday. And I think, if they'd have brought someone in the summer, then Bryan Hill wouldn't be at the club. He would be on loan at Valencia probably. So, or maybe even permanently in Valencia. So, I think that there's definitely a gap there that Spurs need to bring in another player who can compete in those places and hopefully raise the level of the players that are already there as well by giving them that threat of not playing every week. And that's obviously why you want two players for every position, right? Somebody somebody who's quite creative in those positions. I would have thought someone who can play behind the striker, but play as a sort of in those 2-10s position if the width is coming from the wing backs. I mean, there's so many names flying around in those positions. But
you'll know the favourable names, Lyall, the likes of Alexis McAllister, James Maddison. I mean, I think Alexis McAllister's come out today and said that, he's quite happy at Brighton. He's in no rush to make a move. James Maddison, I think he has only got a couple of years left on his deal. It looked like Newcastle were quite close to him during the summer window. Those two names, anything?
Yeah, Maddison's been one that Tottenham looked at for years. I mean, they looked at bringing him in when he went to Norwich. I think they looked at him again when he went to Leicester, and whether he'd be ready for them. And whether they do it now, I'm not sure. Again, buying players from the Premier League halfway through a season again is very costly. He'd have a big valuation on him. I mean, another one that Newcastle looked at in the summer, may look at again, is Pulisic from Chelsea, but. Well, I'm not aware that he's on Spurs' radar. I mean, obviously, there is a sort of a bit of a reset with Chelsea. Obviously, now they're under new ownership, so certainly any bad blood between Chelsea and Tottenham in the past, I think a lot of that is sort of water under the bridge because of, or certainly in terms of the way the clubs are concerned, because so many personnel have moved on from Chelsea, and it's really a new club in many ways. But again, I'm not saying that Spurs are going to go after Christian Pulisic. I'm not aware that they will or not, but. In terms of the profile of the player, that's the kind of player that we're talking about, right?
I think it is a question that has been maybe thrown up in the air a little bit more when you're looking at the caliber of players there. You go from Anthony Gordon to someone more established, kind of like a Pulisic or a Maddison or a McAllister. Do you think the club in that position in particular would be looking to buy a ready-made player, or is that maybe a position that Conte is maybe willing to compromise in bringing in a younger player like an Anthony Gordon, who still is in need of developing, but could have that impact where you said of just putting that pressure at least on the first players to up that kind of standard from there?
Well, it depends what that player gives you, right? I mean, Anthony Gordon ticks a lot of boxes, and that's one of the reasons why they were after him, because not only is he someone that could come in and do it straight away, I think he's a future England international, Anthony Gordon, on his day. I think he's very, very good. And I think under the right coach, he could be developed into a real top player. In a similar way to Richarlison was good at Everton, but since he's moved to Spurs, he's been very good and very good for Brazil as well. And I think it will be similar with Gordon if he came in, to be honest. But he's also young. He's also English. That's not English, but he's also a homegrown player. So he ticks a number of boxes from the club's point of view and the manager's point of view. But then, as you start working your way down the list, obviously less of those boxes are ticked. So you might have the young thing ticked, but he might not have the pedigree that you want, or you might have someone with the pedigree who's not quite as young. So it's a balancing act between everybody at the club finding the right player that suits everybody.
Lyall, thank you so much so far. We're halfway through the inquest, and just for everybody that's watching this right now live, there's about 900 of you across all of our platforms. I will say we do have always do have the name round at the end where Lyall gets a countdown of 50 names thrown at him.
Yeah, the quickfire round.
The quickfire round, as Lyall likes to refer to. I've been doing this for 7 years on Last Word on Spurs. Still loves it. We're joined by the wonderful Matty Hayes and the brilliant news editor Lyall Thomas from Sky Sports, giving his time as we open up the January transfer window here on Last Word on Spurs by, like I say, Lyall Thomas. Lyall, thank you so much so far. So, look, you've given us an idea there of the players Spurs are going to be looking at. You touched upon that right wing back area. I'm just maybe keen to understand, we are, you'd say, overloaded in that area at the moment. We've got Emerson Royale, Matt Doherty, Jed Spence. As far as things stand at the moment, you say, as far as you're aware, Jed Spence isn't going anywhere. But we'll be keen to know from you if that you feel is the same stance for Matt Doherty, who had a good second half to last season before a horrendous challenge by Matty Cash on him has left him trying to basically rebuild, if I'm being honest with you, his fitness, his position back in the team. And Emerson Royale, who, if I'm going to put it kindly, I think Spurs fans that's a player they're probably willing to leave the club if there's a buyer out there. Do you expect any movement from Matt Doherty or Emerson Royale during this January window?
Well, I think they'd be open to offers for Matt. I think they were open to offers for him in the summer. Like you said, he's not quite done it. at Tottenham in general. I don't think he's not quite hit the promise that they would have hoped that he would. And there's various reasons for that. Obviously, injuries play a part in that. To be fair to Matt Doherty, I think it's definitely an area of concern for Conte, because he doesn't seem to be able to settle on one player that he prefers in that position. I mean, you'd probably argue maybe slightly Emerson, at least in the beginning of the season, but I think that's just simply because he was the best of what was available, right? The thing about Conte's system is that the fullbacks are so important and they play such a specific role, and it's such a unique way, I think, really, that he gets his wing backs to play. I mean, he wants them in the box, scoring goals, arriving late, like an old-fashioned, number 8 midfielder would arrive late into the box from either side. That I think that there's probably a limited number of wing backs or fullbacks in the world that can already play the way he wants them to play. So that's probably a hindrance, is finding a player who either already plays like that. Because, I mean, if you look at the players that he's had at different clubs, he's converted wingers into those positions. I mean, the best players he's arguably had in those positions were Perisic on the left and Victor Moses on the right in Inter, and also Victor Moses at Chelsea as well. And both of those were wingers. So, trying to find players who are willing to play that position in the way that he wants, I think is a bit of a challenge. And I think I don't see that he's satisfied, certainly, with what he has on the right-hand side. So I think it's clear that that's an area that they need to sort out. And certainly if they're going to try and bring in a Porro or somebody else, then, one or two even may have to move on, or will have to move on. So I think if any of them, I think I would tip Doherty probably to be more likely.
Well, look, I mean, we've already touched on Pedro Porro as a potential replacement. There's a few other names that Spurs have been linked to in this window if one of those wing backs are to be moving on. There's Monaco's Vanderson. There's Denzel Dumfries, a player from Inter Milan, and Malo Gusto as well from Lyon. Do you know if any of these players are of interest to Spurs, or are they just the typical names that are being thrown around because of who we're looking for?
Well, you mentioned Dumfries. I mean, these are all players that Spurs are certainly aware of. Dumfries is an interesting one, obviously, because he's played at Inter. And, yeah, he's one that the Premier League have been aware of for a while. I mean, he's been a Dutch international. He was at PSV before and did well there. I know a few clubs were looking at him when he was at PSV. I think Tottenham were actually looking at him when he was at PSV. I think I remember that, actually. I think that was in the Pochettino days they had a look at that, but I didn't think he was quite ready. But yeah, I don't expect Dumfries to move anywhere this window. I know Chelsea are also interested in him, but what I've been told is that he's expected to stay put, and that Chelsea might be looking elsewhere at right backs themselves this month. So I would expect Dumfries to stay, but he looks like he's ready for the Premier League now. I think Dumfries. And the other one you mentioned is Vanderson. I think the Monaco one. Yeah, he's someone I know that Brentford have tracked for a very, very long time, Vanderson. I know they were interested in him before they signed Hickey. Another good, young player for the future. More of a development one, I think. I think Dumfries would be more of an elite, established player to come in if he did, rather than Vanderson. But yeah, I mean, listen, I'm not aware of anything particularly on those. Just players that the club are aware of.
Yeah. I can hear the frustration building every time Lyall goes, it's a good one for the future. It's another good one for the future.
Yeah. I'll just say that now.
The anger is raging right now. Look, I think what's interesting, Lyall, I mean, centre-back is one of those positions where I think as fans, I don't know whether it's this something we feel this, so that looking in from the outside, it feels like it's an area that Spurs really do need to consider looking at. I mean, Eric Dyer, and again, there's no disrespect to him, I think there was obviously a period where he was doing very, very well under Conte, very consistent. And it's really been since that World Cup call he got. It seems to have gone to his head. He's lost a real lot of confidence, consistency, which obviously led to him not making the lineup at the weekend. So can't blame Eric Dyer for that defeat. But we look at the defence we've got there. We've got, of course, Japhet Tanganga in there. To be fair to Japhet, if we're being honest, hasn't ever really pushed on since, I think, his debut against Liverpool. And Jason... You obviously remember Jason very, very well, Lyall. Jason's always said that he's never really pushed on from that debut. Haven't really seen the best out of him. I think he desperately needs a loan, if I'm being honest, Japhet Tanganga, because he's had a real lack of game time because of injury. I know, obviously, it does seem that's an area Spurs might look at in the summer, but if there's an opportunity at centre-back, dare I say that name, Bastoni again? Centre back, is that an area Spurs might look at depending on what may happen this window, or do you think it's more likely to be the summer?
I think it's going to be the summer for that. I mean, it's obvious that Tottenham have wanted to strengthen at centre back. I think with two. I mean, really, the priority was a left-footed one, which is obviously what they brought in. But I think they were also looking at right-footed ones as well. There's a number of names that we can go through that we mentioned. Obviously Bastoni and Guardiola were the sort of top two targets for the left-footed one in the summer. Both of them stayed where they are, so it's not like they missed out on them to other clubs. There'll be another year tick down on their contracts next summer. So those two names come back around, and maybe Spurs are in a better position to be able to get one of them on a permanent basis. I think Clement Lenglet is a very good stopgap, and that's probably been a little bit disrespectful to him actually, and because he is a top level player, Lenglet. I think he just needs to a settled run in the team, and I think he could come good. They've also been looking at right-footed ones as well. I mean, there's names we mentioned in the summer that obviously they still like. Milan Skriniar is a player that Tottenham have looked at for a long time. We know that they really like Mark Guay at Crystal Palace as well. So, there are names that they're looking at.
One name on that, Lyall, if you don't mind me, Pierre Hincapié. I think you've mentioned him before.
He's
one that
a number of clubs are looking at as well as a sort of younger, upcoming left-footed centre half. There's quite a few out there actually. I mean, left-footed centre halves are a bit of a commodity really, and most teams now like to have that balance of having a left footer on that side and a right footer on the right side. Obviously Chelsea is signing Badiashile. They gave a medical to Badiashile, today. And he's a left-footed one, so they're looking to bring the left-footed one into there. I know Brighton are also looking at bringing a left-footed player in. I think that who else are looking at left-footed? Well, Southampton, I think, are looking at trying to get a left-footed as one as well. Leeds are in the process of bringing Max Wober, who's a left-footed one from Salzburg. So, and there's plenty of good ones around there. Evan Ndika is another really good player. Playing in Germany that clubs have looked at for a long time. He'd be a talent. I think I've mentioned Ndika before in the past with a few clubs, including in Spurs, and he's one to sort of keep an eye on for the future as well. I like him; he's a good player. Tommy, to answer your question, centre halves, I think that's something they'll look at in the summer. I think Conte even said the other day that he's happy with the centre half options. So.
I remember the excitement I felt, Lyall, when we were speaking about Badiashile last summer as a target for Spurs. But look, story of our lives. I think Spurs fans have been perhaps a little bit surprised to hear that a central defensive midfielder could actually be on the shopping list either in January or in the summer. Having brought in Rodrigo Bentancur and Yves Bissouma over the last 12 months, and already with the likes of Højbjerg and Skip at our disposal, it has been a bit of a surprise that Frank Kessie is a name that's coming up again, as well as Weston McKennie, which I think is maybe our modern day Leandro Damião. In terms of Frank Kessie, I know there were reports from Spain last week that we'd actually made a bid. Whether that's true or not, I'm unsure. But is that a name that you've come across as one that Spurs could be targeting?
Well, we were talking about Kessie a year ago, weren't we? Because Tottenham were trying to sign him then. So, obviously they're still interested in the player. Right? I think he's one of Conte and one of Paratici's favourite players out there. I think Frank Kessie. They really tried to get him last January, but he was talking to Barcelona and obviously signed a pre-contract agreement with them last January and joined them in the summer. So, I was surprised to see that report about Kessie as well, to be honest, because he's been doing okay out there. I mean, he's only played half a season for Barcelona so far, so it's a bit early, I think, to be talking about him leaving already. I was surprised to see that one. I'm not aware that that's necessarily on the cards at all. But then again, I haven't probed very deeply into that one or that name in particular just because of that so far. So, But, I mean, in midfield, I think Spurs do need another one. I think, to be honest, they need another defensively minded one. I mean, Skip, to be fair to him, he was coming through, wasn't he, in Conte's early days and really impressing and showing promise that he could be a first-team player. And then he got that terrible injury. And he was out for a long time. And that really affects players. And, he's got his work cut out trying to come back from that and getting it back into the first team because, like you said, 2 new midfielders have come in, right? So, he's effectively fourth choice. And I think as time ticks and he doesn't play, he really needs to potentially, go somewhere else, maybe on loan again or something, to get some more games. And maybe there's obviously a space then that Spurs need to fill. And I'm sure Conte would like, 4 top options that he can have at his disposal in those positions. So yeah, again, it's an interesting one to observe. I think that position over the next month, but especially leading into the summer. I'd be surprised if they do something in that position this month, because I'm just not aware that a player that's really going to improve Spurs is on the market. I mean, there's been a lot of talk about Sofia and Amrabat. I mean, Tottenham have looked at him and they've been interested in him for a while, and he's had a good World Cup, so that also brings players onto the radar as well. So, but I'm not aware that Spurs are pushing for him at the moment. Amrabat.
All right. What about Rabiot? Lyall, definitely a name that I think has come up on Last Word on Spurs before. Definitely, you've definitely mentioned him definitely within the last 5 years, Lyall. Again, another name that we should keep an eye on maybe for the summer, or is that just speculation because the agent's maybe linking the player?
Speculation.
Okay. No? Okay, fine. Like I say, we are going to do the roundup towards the end. There's even calls to having one of our own crackers at right wing back. I'm not sure how Cracks might feel about that, but based on our options there, maybe Cracks would do a good job for us, bless him. He was on form last night for us, that's for sure. We have seen Conte, drop that hint over the possibility of signing a forward, as Matty alluded to earlier there, Lyall. Now, we have seen the likes recently of Harvey Barnes, Wilfred Zaha, Ismail Assar, Adama Traore, get the baby oil ready, all linked. And even, I think, Rennes forward Martin Terrier. Any of those names, Lyall, scream out to you as ones that we should be really keeping an observation on this window?
I wouldn't say so at this stage. I mean, Martin Terrier is sort of an interesting one just because he's a late bloomer in his career, Terrier, and he's at Rennes. And would be very affordable, just because again he doesn't have that pedigree, he doesn't have that same fanfare behind him. Terrier, I think he's 26, I think he is, something like that, and he certainly hits very highly in the stats in the French league and has done for probably a couple of seasons. And I think maybe a lot of analysts and people like me were thinking he might have been a bit of an anomaly, but he's actually playing well again this season, Terrier. So he's an interesting one, but again, I've not heard that Spurs are really hot on doing that, on doing a deal for him. Zaha, again, I think I mentioned it in the summer. For me, I think Zaha would be ideal.
You've always said that. I mean, you've always said that on the last one on Spurs. That you always feel Zaha would be
I'm just generally a big Wilf Zaha fan. I think he's a top player. I think he deserves to have a shot at playing for a top club. I know he's sort of coming towards, I don't want to say the end of his career, but he's 30 now. So I think the age thing is what I know is the age.
Would he fit a Conte team though, Lyall, in terms of, we think when Conte wants and does have the 11 that he wants, you imagine they're quite a pressing team that would want to obviously push on, and I don't know if Zaha's always coming to the end of.
Yeah, I think that's maybe one question mark over his game, but certainly hitting on the counter attack. I mean, I can't think of many better players really. I mean, I know sometimes Zaha's end product can feel a bit wasteful, but he's actually scores plenty of goals from his position and is a real threat. I mean, that goal he scored away at Liverpool earlier this season, I just watched that and just thought, well, how can you not want that in your team? The finish was sublime, and he's got his game has really developed. He's a lot more calm in his decision making than he used to be. A little less sort of explosive, maybe a little bit less explosive as he used to be, but now more measured. He knows the game now. He reads the game very well, and I think he would be a real asset, to be honest. But I think the only way that Spurs would look at that would potentially be on a free in the summer, just because of his age. I'd be surprised again if they do that now. Ismail Assar, you mentioned. I've not heard Spurs been looking actively on him.
Okay.
Who's the other one you mentioned?
Adama Traore. How can we forget?
Okay. I think that's been and gone, to be honest.
Yeah, I think many will be relieved of that one. Harvey Barnes is an interesting one because a player.
Sorry, yes, Harvey Barnes is an interesting one actually, because again he ticks those similar boxes to Anthony Gordon, and Jack Harrison was the other one that Spurs were very interested in the summer. Jack Harrison from Leeds. another one to keep an eye on, I think, generally in those positions, because he was definitely high on the list last summer. Jack Harrison was. And Harvey Barnes is another one, isn't he? In that sort of that mold, that similar position, young and up and coming, English, homegrown. So yeah, he ticks a lot of boxes. But I think I'm not sure Harvey Barnes is quite there yet. I mean, I think he's been impressed a little bit more lately, hasn't he? But whether there's an argument that he's at a similar level to Harrison and Gordon, maybe, but I still think that Gordon and Harrison are better players than Barnes. Personally, that's certainly my personal opinion.
Okay, Matty, let's show we. I tell you what, we'll move the show over to some of the players that we've got in terms of the midfield that we've touched upon. I think, like I say, we've got, in terms of youth players and prospects, obviously, it does feel like Matasar is one that you mentioned. Probably, as things stand at the moment, do you think there'll be any movement on him this month? Because there are some players in that squad that probably feel they need a loan, the likes of Sarr, maybe Harvey White, Alfie Devine. I mean, I think this was the frustration yesterday, that when you looked at the bench of Tottenham, there was not a single attacking player on there. And you just think, Conte's almost message to the board maybe that he hasn't got options on there. Well, could it have been a massive issue to put maybe someone on there from the youth? I just wonder. I mean, again, it would have given those a bit of confidence, and also at the same time shown he's a little bit more flexible, that he would maybe consider them. But it does feel with Conte that unless you're actually ready-made and you're proven, you're not going to get too many chances here. So I just wonder for the likes of Sarr, for Harvey White, for Alfie Devine, even Brian Hill, do you think these guys are likely going to be looking for moves this window?
I think if Spurs bring one in attacking positions, I think it's very likely that Brian Hill will be able to go on loan. I think obviously that was on the cards in the summer. We've touched on Spence already, haven't we? Devine and White, I think they do need loans. They need development loans as part of their long-term strategy. So I won't be surprised to see them get loans as well. Matar Sarr is an interesting one, because I think Conte sort of bigged him up recently, didn't he? And said he was very impressed with him in training while they had the World Cup break. Sorry, not after he came back from the World Cup, because he came back earlier, didn't he? I think than a lot of other players, and he was able to showcase what he can do a little bit. I think that for Matar Sarr, a loan would be the right thing in my opinion, but I don't think that I don't necessarily know whether it's on the cards or not, to be honest.
Look, moving on to a few players that Tottenham got rid of in the summer, and are looking at maybe getting rid of again in January, and potentially getting rid of again in the summer, as we struggle to find permanent moves for the likes of Joe Rodon, Giovanni Lo Celso and Tanguy Ndombele. Look, on the front of Joe Rodon, there's talk that loan move could be called short because of the lack of game time he's getting over at Rennes. With Giovanni Lo Celso, we've known really since the move happened that there is a clause within that deal that would allow Tottenham to cancel that loan if he were to get an offer for the player in January. And with Tanguy Ndombele, Napoli hold an option to purchase him for €30 million as part of that deal where they loaned him in the summer. Do you think we're going to see any movement on any of those three in the January window?
I've been doing a little bit of probing around on Ndombele and Lo Celso recently, just to see if they have any intentions, any of those clubs, on doing any permanent deals for them or activating those options. And I'm told no, not at the moment. That there's something they're more likely to look at in the summer. I'm not sure about Joe Rodon. I'm not really sure. I've not really been paying much attention, to be honest, on what he's been doing recently and how he's been getting on. Actually, he's sort of fallen off the radar a little bit for me. But the questions I've asked about whether Napoli, are going to look to talk to Spurs about making that permanent this month, is actually no. It's something they'll look at in the summer. So, yeah, not right now. Which I think it might be a shame for Spurs, because I think actually doing permanent deals on them now might suit them. Actually, give them a little bit more money to play within the market themselves. I think they probably like that. That would probably work in their favour. But I think it's just generally, I think clubs are a little bit averse to doing that when they know they've got the option until the summer, because anything could happen with that player between then and now. They could activate the option and then he has a terrible injury and he's out for a long time, and then that leaves the club in a situation where they've just bought a player who's now injured. So a lot can happen between the back end of the season. So
we are going to touch upon
pragmatic to do it now.
No, that's absolutely fine. We are going to touch upon some more players towards the end. We're just conscious maybe on contracts, Lyall, where we stand. I mean, we have heard reports about, a good 4 or 5 weeks ago that Spurs were potentially planning to offer Eric Dyer and Pierre-Emile Højbjerg new contracts. Is that something you've maybe heard is happening behind the scenes at all? Contracts for potentially Eric Dyer and Pierre Højbjerg?
Not heard that personally. No.
Okay.
I'm not aware of that. That doesn't necessarily mean it's not happening, but I've not heard that myself.
Okay. I'm sure Matty's one's probably been very, very linked to our manager at the moment. I'll let you take this one, Matty.
Yeah, it's Harry Kane and the conversation we're having every season at this point. Look, we all know what happened with Harry Kane last summer and that failed move to Manchester City. You know, he said himself that he's not really going to stick around at Spurs just for the sake of it. If we're not matching his ambition, he is, I think, rightfully going to look elsewhere to see if there's another club that can bring him where he wants to be. Again, uncertainty around whether or not Kane will sign a new contract, uncertainty about whether or not talks have been initiated. Do you have any update on a potential contract for Harry Kane and I suppose that link that we're expecting between Kane and Conte's future?
No, I mean, there's no update as far as I'm aware at the moment. You know, I'm not aware that anything's imminent on that. And I think that, you know, while there's still plenty of uncertainty around about a few things, you know, I don't see why, if you're Harry Kane, that you would necessarily commit to a new contract at this point. Obviously, like you said, with uncertainty hanging over the manager as well, and his contract and how long he's going to be staying around for. I don't think Harry Kane's desire to fight for the top trophies is I think it's undiminished. Really, I think it's just as strong as it's always been. So he will be wanting to have, you know, seek assurances and know where the club is headed this summer. With the manager and all those kinds of things, I think, before where they are and whether in the Champions League or not, and that kind of thing, before he makes a decision on his future, which would only be the right thing to do, right? So that's where it's at the moment. I wouldn't expect any developments on that, to be honest, in the short term.
It does feel mad. I mean, I say when I think about it, we ask you about the players' contracts. Again, I can't help but say this, and this is representative of a lot of the comments tonight that we're well aware of. Look, we've got about 900 of you watching us live at the moment, and again, it's impossible to reflect and not say how downbeat the mood is right now. And again, like I say, Lyall from the outside gave us that almost opinion that Spurs aren't far away from the top four. It just feels that at the moment, everything around the club just feels so toxic at the moment. And we really hope that a result against Palace will change the mood. And if we do bring Lyall back on before the end of the month, although I'm thinking after this he'll probably turn his phone off.
What I should say as well is actually, I don't think the mood is toxic in the club. I think the mood is toxic among the fans, but I don't get gauged that the mood is toxic inside the club. I mean, if you think about what the club has been through over the last few years, there has been times when the mood has been toxic, and it's definitely not now. I mean, if you look at the way that the team is actually, I mean, the performances have been flat, but I think that to a large extent, there's not that much question over the commitment that they're giving. There's more a question of the quality that they're producing. Do you know what I mean?
Mm.
I mean, yeah. You'll know better than me because you just watch more minutes of Spurs than me.
Yeah.
Whether certain players are not, actually committed on the field, but they seem to be. To me, they just seem to be, some of them, not good enough. That's all, or not at that top level, right?
Yep.
So yeah. I mean, look, as far as Harry Kane's future being tied to the manager, I think Harry Kane's future is tied to performances really of the team and where the team and the club is at come the end of the season and being in the Champions League or not. I mean, obviously he's going to want to work with top managers.
Yep.
And I think then bringing Antonio Conte in went a long way to keeping Kane when they did. I mean, as much as that was also holding firm on their valuation of Kane as well and not giving in to the interest in the offers from Manchester City at the time, it was also, I think, keeping Kane, not just keeping Kane at the club, but also keeping Kane happy at the club, needed a top manager to come in and show them that they would be competing up at the top and there or thereabouts. And he got the team back into the Champions League, right? And there was no talk of Kane leaving in the summer, just gone, because they were playing Champions League football. So, we come to this summer and Tottenham they're in the Champions League, then, I'm sure a new contract would be very much part of the equation. But there's still so much to play out before then.
There is. I mean, one thing we should always say is that, look, I mean, whoever the manager is, which sounds bizarre me saying that, I mean, there should always be a case of forward planning in terms of looking at what we've got as a squad and taking into account that certain players' contracts are coming towards an end. The likes of Lucas Moura, who I think he's got about a year and a half left now. I mean, there's been strong links to him that he may go to Sao Paulo. I mean, maybe go back to his boyhood club in Brazil. And I think potentially for Lucas Moura hasn't had a huge amount of game time recently. So you would imagine there's going to be again, Lyall might be you'll definitely be able to tell me more about this than I can, but there might be a case that we're supposed to be looking to forward plan. I mean, Hugo Lloris, again, his error that led to the goal yesterday. You'd like to think Spurs are already trying to look at who is going to be the hire to his throne, the succession to Hugo Lloris. We have heard reports that Spurs are maybe looking behind the scenes at signing a couple of centre-backs, one for the left and maybe another one centrally and on the right for the summer, and also looking at potentially Lloris's replacement in the summer. Is that something you would imagine Spurs are looking at doing behind the scenes now, given what we're seeing in terms of performances from Lloris, who, to be fair, saved a huge amount of points for Tottenham Lloris during his time at the club, but most recently, I think it does feel Hugo is on the decline, and that's no disrespect to his quality, but it's also the age, it's the nature of the league. It's also, I think, with Conte's system, to play out from the back, he doesn't feel comfortable to do that as a goalkeeper. It's not what his skill set is, right?
Yeah, well, I think actually just on that point that his playing out from the back has been okay recently. I know he's had errors in the past. His errors recently seems to have been, handling the ball and errors leading to goals. I mean, he's the player in the Premier League that's caused the most number of errors leading directly to goals so far, with I think 3. Which doesn't sound like a huge amount, but then again, that's 3 goals that can change results, right? Listen, Hugo Lloris has been a superb goalkeeper in world football and one of Tottenham's best ever signings. There's a huge argument for him being one of, if not the best player Tottenham have brought in from abroad, considering how many games he's played and the level he's played at and what he's produced for the club as captain. I mean, he should go down as a Tottenham legend. But in this industry and this game, you have to be pretty brutal and pretty shrewd, but especially when it comes to turnover of your squad. And when a player is on the decline, there's no real room for that sentiment, really. Because when you let that sentiment affect your decision-making, then results can suffer. So I think, in my opinion, we're getting towards the time now where Tottenham need to find their next Hugo Lloris. They need to find their next number one goalkeeper for the next, 4, 5, 6 years. I think that's why we've seen some links as well to Jordan Pickford recently, because I think they're starting to think about that there may be time to do that as well come the summer. But as well, Hugo Lloris has had a very long, illustrious career and won World Cups and got to a World Cup final and again recently. So
it's a travesty, Lyall, that he is. Listen, his career isn't over yet. It will be a travesty if he leaves Tottenham without anything to show for his time here. I know he's done really well. He's won the World Cup, but it's just terrible in terms of the amount.
If I'm being shrewd, actually, I would say that the travesty is that Tottenham haven't brought in another goalkeeper that's been consistently ready to come in for Lloris when he's not been playing as well. That's the travesty for me.
No, you're right. That's fair. I mean, listen,
if I was to be critical, I think Tottenham have had over the last however many years a lot of different managers and a lot of different transfer windows to be able to line up those successes to certain positions, including the goalkeepers. But it feels like there've just been too many stopgaps along the way. You've had Gazzaniga, you've had. I mean, Vaughan was a great number 2 for a long time because he pushed. I mean, I think I said this many, many times. One of the great things about Michel Vaughan was not just that he was willing to sit on the bench and not complain about it, but he was also pushing Hugo Lloris in training to be the best that he could possibly be. So they had that intensity in training and they got on really, really well and had a great partnership. And, that was another reason why they brought him back out of an emergency when they had the injury to, I forget who it was, but then they had Joe Hart and Gazzaniga. Now they got Fraser Forster. So, it feels like they've just sort of gone, well, yeah, let's just get a number 2 in who's experienced and doesn't mind sitting on the bench. And, I mean, if you look around at other clubs, they're starting to bring in 3, they have 3 goalkeepers now. They're starting to have 3 options where they can, of having 2 elite goalkeepers that are pushing each other for the position, and a number 3 as well. So, yeah. I think, the goalkeeper department is something that Spurs will need to look at in the long run. I think probably in the summer, not now.
Yeah, I think that's a brilliant quiz question. Which goalkeepers did Tottenham sign while Lloris was there? So when
how many number 2s has Lloris played with is probably a great quiz question. Yeah.
You'd easily forget about Pau Lopez, who's obviously got off doing wonderful things for himself in Europe as well. But Lyall, there's one question that I always love asking at the end of these shows, and it's mainly to see the illustrious guest that we have squirm a little bit as he tries to come up with the right number. But how many players do you expect Tottenham to bring in before the bell rings on the 31st of January?
I think we could expect 1. 2 would be probably a pleasant surprise for Spurs fans, but
don't set the bar too high, Lyall.
They brought 2 in, yeah, I know.
I'm overwhelmed. About to fall off my chair, Lyall.
Well, they brought in 2 last January, didn't they? So it's they are looking to use the January window more than they have done in the past. But that's just because of the work that needs to be done in the squad. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting month ahead, and I'm looking forward to tackling it and trying to find out what's going on and try and let you guys know that it's going to be fun. Will
it be fun for us? Is it ever fun for us? Do we ever come here happy with you? Like, I feel like it's always like we come with a sense of aggression. Like, give us something. What I'm going to do is I am just going to quickly allow guys, if you want to send any names that we haven't asked yet, feel free to send those names through them. And we've got one question for Lyall. If, like I say, before we do that, Lyall, I suppose Matt touched upon there how many we're going to sign. Maybe I've got a question to ask you. I'm not sure if you can answer this. With who we are going to sign, is Conte going to be happy with that? Do you think he will be happy with what Spurs will do in this window? Probably a difficult question to answer, but one I'd like to know your opinion on, maybe rather than any information. Well, I think you've got it.
I don't think they're going to bring anybody in that he's not going to want. I mean, that's just not going to happen. That's not.
I say that because clearly Spencer's a player that, no offence, he obviously didn't want because he obviously hasn't played and he's a club signing. That's why I asked that question.
Again, it's not. I don't think it's as black and white as that. I think it's. He understood the club's position, has understood the club's position, and said okay to it because he understood that the club also wanted to bring in young players to develop, and he is a great coach to develop players as well. And so I think that, like I said, it's a balancing act, and I think that both sides agreed that the club agreed. Okay, if you want us to commit money to 33-year-old Ivan Perisic on a free. Into his wages and bring in a player like that who's obviously aging and there's no real sort of resale value necessary on him and things like that, then okay, we'll bring you the experienced players that you want to go at it now, but we also want to bring in young players to develop as well. And I think both sides agreed with that. But in terms of now, I think they will look to get in players that Conte wants and will be able to use now to kick Tottenham back up into the top 4. I mean, as perverse as it kind of sounds, it actually suits Conte, I think, or suits. It certainly it helps the argument for bringing in more players that Spurs have dropped out of the top 4 just before the transfer window opens. Do you know what I mean? It's like the table doesn't lie, and people do use that to justify or help the arguments for what they're going to do and bring players in, right? So Tottenham in 5th position, just outside the top 4. It's a stronger argument for bringing in new players and improving the team than being in the top 4 already, right? We've dropped out, we're sliding, performances are sliding. We need to do something to arrest that. Let's go and bring some players in. This situation actually sort of plays into the hands of anybody who would want to bring in more players in the window, actually, because I said obviously the results in the table don't lie. So, if Spurs were sitting pretty in 2nd and chasing down Arsenal, then, they might feel they're in less need of investing at this point and can save it for the summer. But I think, the fact that results have been sliding and they are where they are, it puts them in a position where they can say, okay, yeah, we need to go and do something.
Yeah, Lyall, I promise you, interrogation is just about to end. I'm going to grab a couple of names in. Feel free, Matt, if I've missed any here. We've seen a few names coming through. I think De Vrij one, Ferran Torres, Harry Maguire. I don't know if he's going to be cheering me up or making me feel worse. Any links to them?
I think these are players that people just want, is it?
I would imagine these are a mixture of players that
De Vrij's worked under Conte before.
Yes,
and we know he likes him a lot. Yeah, another right footer. Another good player. But there's 2 right footers that are good at Inter, and I think Skriniar they like more than De Vrij.
Okay.
The other one you mentioned was.
I'm trying to remember now myself. Harry Maguire. I've just
Ferran Torres.
Ferran Torres.
No, I think Ferran Torres is very happy where he is.
I don't blame him. I wish I was Ferran Torres.
So if Harry Maguire was the one that you said yes to, I wouldn't have been back on the channel. I couldn't deal with that.
You might like to know. I think I may have mentioned it before, but back when he was at Hull and he moved to Leicester, there was a lot of reports Tottenham were looking to sign him. And I think that there was some interest from a few people at the club then. But what I knew at the time is that Pochettino didn't rate him at that point. Didn't rate him. I think he didn't think that he was the right defender for him. I think he didn't think that he could play with the ball well enough for him. And obviously Tottenham didn't go and sign him. And now in hindsight, you could potentially say that may have been the right decision. Who knows?
I think Harry Maguire in that high line that Pochettino played as well would have been a disaster.
I'll tell you what, Matt, you might
not the profile.
Hang around, Matt. Give it 6 months, you might see it. I'm not even joking. You think I'm joking? I'm not actually joking. Yeah. Any names you want to fire there, Matty, or any names you want to fire at Lyall? Can we let the interrogation end, Matt?
There's a few. I just want to bring it. Just a few more attacking players. The ones that, to be honest, I haven't seen linked in the media, but they've just caught my eye. There's Karuma Toma from Brighton. There's Iliman and Di from Sheffield United, and Mohamed Kudus from Ajax, who I think was linked a couple of weeks ago.
I haven't heard any of those names mentioned with Spurs. Kudus is a good player, though. Everton looked at him quite strongly in the summer. I think they wanted to do it, but I think Ajax wouldn't let him go because they sold Anthony, so that they weren't prepared to sell another one. But yeah, he's a good player.
Ending it on Porro if we can, then Lyall. So obviously you said earlier, just for any new listeners that are coming, we've got about 900 of you watching us live here. Obviously, Lyall, you announced at the top of the show that as things stands at the moment, Spurs have called their interest. It's one that they may revisit. Do you think as that window ticks down, it seems a lot is going to be dependent on obviously Spurs moving on one of those three they've currently got there in terms of, as you said earlier, Emerson Royale, Matt Doherty, Jed Spence. Do you think he'll be a Spurs player come the end of the window? Yeah, what do you think? Just to finish on that.
Depends with I think the Sporting Lisbon need to be a bit more flexible, I think, on their terms on this and their demands for this release clause. I think it sounds like they are. I mean, just my assessment of the market, it sounds like they're being a little bit unrealistic, actually. And so, if that happens, then maybe let's see. I mean, yeah, there's. You have to remember as well, I'm going to talk in more general terms here. I'm not saying this is necessarily the case for Porro, but when Premier League clubs are interested in players on the continent, it suits everybody on the, wherever that country might be, for everybody to know that the Premier League clubs are interested in, because the Premier League clubs are the top echelon at the moment, right? The most money, it's the most elite league in the world. So if you're looking to add valuation to your player and add interest to your player and big him up, if there's Premier League clubs that come making inquiries about your players, you're going to make the most of that situation, So you're going to see a lot of noise about it, and I think that's been the case for Porro. I think that's been the case for a little bit for Enzo Fernandez recently. I mean, great player, would be great in the Premier League, but things tend to be exaggerated, I think, a little bit. I'm always very skeptical when I see stories about, and again, I'm not talking specifically about this Porro situation at the moment, but when I see all of a sudden advanced talks for this player, it's about to happen, it's close, and we're one day into the window, and it's coming out, and it's coming out
of Tottenham. You definitely know it's skeptical.
I mean, I've got to be skeptical. It's my job to be skeptical. It's my job to sit there and go, hang on a second, that doesn't sound quite right. That sounds like somebody really, really, really wants it to happen, or a few people really, really want it to happen, and they're using, as much as they can to railroad that deal into happening. And there's plenty of that goes on, right? But it's part of our job to try to decipher, pick out what is actually happening out of that hyperbole, right? Or hyperbole, shall I say.
Yeah, I don't envy you, Lyall. Like I say, the job you got now, especially with the way in which probably the way it's changed in the industry. I know we spoke about this in person when I was with you during the summer window, which feels now such a long time ago. It's obviously the job you have now. It's changed in so many different ways to what it was 7-8 years ago. Just the way the nature.
Everybody's a transfer expert now, aren't they? Everybody's got the platform to convey themselves as somebody who's in the know, or somebody who's got sources, or somebody who's reporting on transfers. It's very easy to get caught up in the excitement of it, or it's very easy to get swept away by, so much speculation on social media or on other websites that this deal is going to happen and that deal is going to happen. And don't get me wrong, that's all part of the transfer market. That's all it's all great fun, and the speculation of it is what sort of drives football forward as an entity, right? It's still a really important part of it. but at the same time, a lot of it is just noise. And you still need to have good journalists around. I'm not talking about myself necessarily. I'm just talking about the nature of the industry itself. There are lots of good journalists out there who do that, who do have the contacts, who have the relationships, the trustworthy relationships with people that they can pick up the phone to or shoot a text off to or whatever and say, is this right? Is there anything in this? Is this correct? What's actually true out of this, or what isn't true out of this? Or, I mean, in an ideal world, obviously, you want to be in a position where you have a good idea of what clubs' plans and intentions are. So where you can see something and you say, well, actually, I know that isn't right, or I know that is something that I can ignore and not waste time on trying to corroborate, because I've already got a good idea of what the club wants to do or what the player wants to do. That's the ideal situation, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So yeah, it is. Basically, again, I'm not going to lie. I enjoy it. I do enjoy it. I enjoy doing that. I enjoy picking the bones out of things.
Well, mate, listen, we love having you on. Although sometimes when you come on, you must think they really enjoy this. We do enjoy it. Bearing in mind just how painful these months are.
People watching also enjoy it a little bit as well at the same time.
Oh, absolutely. I'm sure they do. Like I say, it's never ending with Tottenham. It's never ending. Lyall, thank you so much. It's probably finally for you. Where can people check and obviously keep an eye on what's going to be happening during this January window? Where can they keep an eye on everything you're going to be reporting?
Sky Sports News, Channel 409, or online, obviously, skysports.com. In our transfer centre especially, the transfer centre is the place to go. That's where all our transfer news will go. That's really the place that you want to be checking all the time. Obviously, we also, aggregate the best or the most reliable of what we think is being reported elsewhere as well at the same time, to try and give people more of a well-rounded overall view of what's going on and what other people are reporting as well. Like I said, there are other great journalists out there that are worth following and listening to. And obviously you can follow Sky Sports News and myself on social media, Twitter as well. So in particular is where I put all my sports news stories. So yeah.
Perfect.
Here's to another month of fun and games.
Lyall, hopefully we'll catch up with you before the end of the month as well. Matty, look, we opened the window with Lyall. Lots to come on Last Word on Spurs. Let's hope we've got something to celebrate right come the end of it.
Oh yeah, I've no doubt. We're going to get every player that we could pot. No, look, it's going to be another interesting window. That's for sure. There's definitely going to be, like Lyall said, well, you can say definitely, but I think there'll definitely be at least one player coming in. So it's going to be fun talking about it and kind of working through the mud that we're going to be seeing, and of course some fantastic guests on the show. And Rakeem, looking forward to another month on here with you. So hopefully it's
absolutely, mate. Totally agree. Well, listen, from Matty, from Lyall, from myself, guys, please, as always, keep safe, keep well, keep the faith. And as always, come on, you Spurs.
Come on.